Hello, my name is Matthew, and I just read The Yellow Face by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This is a part of my reading series and book club with Steve Donahue. We're reading murder mysteries in the month of March, and we're reading all of the Sherlock Holmes stories. And I just read The Yellow Face, and of all the stories that I've read so far, this one is the weakest. I found it disappointing and just not as good as any of the short stories that I've read so far. And I spent some time thinking about it, and there are a few key reasons that I think this short story doesn't hold up. And it does begin with Watson explaining that the stories that we're reading, he's actually writing. And so he's writing the cases of Sherlock Holmes, which allows for a lot of the exaggeration. Um, all of the stories, Sherlock is just breezing through, no matter how fantastical or outrageous, and solving all of these cases, even if there's not a person um, being caught and sent to prison and things like that. And Watson points out that there are reasons why um, he's not talking about Sherlock's failures, even though he has had cases that he hadn't been able to solve. It's also pointed out that the cases that Sherlock couldn't solve remained a mystery, and no one else was able to solve them either. And so he said this is a particularly interesting case where, even though Sherlock was wrong, he still managed to figure out the mystery. And uh, it begins with Sherlock and Watson going on a walk, and we're told Sherlock uh, has no time for um, unnecessary exercise just for fitness sake. But if there's a goal in mind, uh, he can perform terrific feats of strength. And this is the story where it's mentioned that he was a champion boxer. But while they're out, someone had visited the apartment in Baker Street, and by the time Sherlock and Watson had gotten back, the page of the house lets them know that someone came in a frenzy and had already left. And Sherlock goes, "Ah, so much for this walk." Uh, he's been bored and idle, and would have very much liked to have um, an intriguing case, and the fact that this person was there and in a frenzy meant that it must have been something of very important. And there is a there's the great little moment where the person that was there in a frenzy and left had forgotten their pipe on the table. And again, Sherlock picks up the pipe and is able to do all of these great deductions. And we have a little moment between Sherlock and Watson. I always love that. The person comes back and says, I need you to help me. It's not necessarily a crime or anything like that, but I need advice. I don't know what to do. My marriage is in trouble. And we then get the set piece where the person that's visiting tells the story. And it's someone that had married a woman. They've been married for a few years. He loves her, and he's sure that she loves him, but there's been this mysterious impediment in their marriage. And he goes on. She was a widower and had a child in America. She's an American that lived in Atlanta. Or maybe she went to America and met the person. I can't remember now. But yellow fever breaks out. Her original husband and child die, and so she comes back to England with a small fortune, meets this man, and they get married. Now, she goes to her husband, who she had um, turned over the fortune to him, just to have it under one bank account or something like that. And so, even though it's their money, she still was requesting $100 and says, "You can't ask me why, but I need the $100." And so it's a huge figure. He thought she would wanted to buy a dress or something, but he gives it to her easily, no trouble. But he's still a little put off that there's a secret. So he's walking, the storyteller, the frenzied storyteller, is walking down the street one day and notices that one of the available cottages has been, is now occupied. There's a new people moving into the house. And he looks in the window and he sees this livid yellow, deathly, rigid mask of a face. So it's just this really unnatural yellow countenance appearing in the window. And when he looks back, the face is gone. He goes up to the door, knocks, and wants to introduce himself to the new neighbor. The woman answers the door and very quickly rebukes him and slams the door in his face. He goes home. It's nighttime. He's in bed with his wife. She seems to be awake, but she's lying in bed and maybe she's fallen asleep. And he says, "We have new people living in that cottage that was unoccupied." To no response. In the middle of the night, while the woman thinks that the husband is sleeping, she gets up, puts on her clothes, puts on her slippers, and runs out. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning. The man, although usually a heavy sleeper, was awakened by this. Looks out the window and sees her running towards this cottage. When she comes back, he says, "Well, why did you sneak out in the middle of the night?" She will not give an answer. He finds her again going to the cottage, comes out. He wants to just break the door down and go in and see what's going on. She says, "You'll ruin our whole marriage, you'll ruin the whole life, if you'll ruin our lives if you do that. Just trust me, everything will come out eventually." Eventually, he does. Another episode happens, and he does break into the house, or charge into the house, and it's abandoned. There's a few times where he saw that yellow face in the window, and he thinks that his marriage is falling apart. He can't understand what's going on, and this is the story that he's explaining to Sherlock. And Sherlock says, "Okay, go back. If there's people in the house, send off a telegram. We'll be there in an hour. If there's nobody in the house, we'll be there tomorrow morning. Watson and Sherlock." Sherlock makes the deduction that the husband in America had lived, and so the husband's in the house. And he gets a telegram. The house is occupied again, and Sherlock and Watson show up, and the plan is again to just walk into the house, which they do. The big reveal is disappointing in a lot of ways. So it turns out the mystery, the reason why the wife has been doing all of these strange things, running out of the house in the middle of the night and being secretive, is that although her husband died in Atlanta, her child did not. And the child is black. And so her husband in America was black. And it talks about the disappointment she had with when the child was born. It still had a very dark complexion, and she was sickly and couldn't take her back to England. But the child got healthy enough, and now she was able to use that $100 to get the child and the maid or the nurse taking care of her to move into this cottage. All typically convoluted and fantastical. The the disappointment of the story is supposed to hinge on that it's a black girl, and the pale yellow face was a mask. She had to wear white gloves, and this poor thing is just trapped in this room, um, being told to put on a mask during the day just in case if someone looks in the window, they won't see a black person. Uh, and it's one of the disappointments is that these short stories do, in some ways, in various ways, date themselves. They are very much written of the time. Things like Sherlock's drug use. The cocaine is mentioned, even if it's mentioned as a vice, it's also mentioned rather casually. He indulges in cocaine. All of the smoking, all of the cigars, the cigarettes, the pipes, that dates the stories as well. It adds to Sherlock's character and all that, but it is dated. So it's strange that we have a this character that's also a drug addict. This story dates itself in just a much more striking way. The racism played into the characters, although there should be this overarching feeling that although the frenzied storyteller, when he learns all of this, scoops up the girl, gives her a kiss, and just says, "We're going to go back to our home. Like, you didn't think much of me." So there is redemption there, but the idea that the sting of the reveal is that she's black and she's wearing a mask, that part didn't work so well. And the didn't work at all. The other aspect is this short story really feels like at this point there have been several recycled elements from earlier stories. Of course, the person showing up in haste and in a frenzy, having to tell a story, that's just the structure of these short stories. Um, Having a marriage where there's a secret, um, having the wife that was from America that had an incomplete past and how that comes back into the present, the face in the window that disappears, and so just elements that are now being recycled in these short stories. And even though at the very beginning we're told this is a case that Sherlock failed at deducing, but still came out with wrapping it up, he thought that the husband was alive, where it turned out the child was alive. But the way that he solved the case was exactly what the guy was doing in the first place. The guy was going into the house is empty, he knocks on the door, the woman answers, but door slams in his face. Sherlock and Watson show up and they go, "Well, we're just going to go in the house again," and then everything is revealed. So a few aspects that I really liked when they were inspecting the pipe. Watson's prologue talking about how there is decision making and artistry and artistic license taken on constructing these short stories. Those parts were interesting. The actual story, when we get to that part, the story, the reveal, the solution, Sherlock's methods leave much to be desired. So that is The Yellow Face by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Let me know if you've read it. Let me know what your thoughts are on it. Thank you for watching. Please leave a comment if you would like, and take care. Bye.